Welcome to Beyond the Coverage. I'm Chris Horner, and as promised on the last video, I want to talk about Q36.5 and Tom Pidcock. Certainly want to talk about Tom Pidcock and throughout the years that he spent on Ineos and now on Q36.5, because there's a big drama story there attached to the British rider for Q36.5, because when he came over to the team, this team was small team. I mean, talking really small and fighting to get invitations into big races. But with the drama over there at Team Ineos and Tom Pidcock not having the biggest of results, he's had some fine results. Strade Bianche he won with Team Ineos. He won Amstel Gold being his biggest win. He has about 4 big wins, but Amstel Gold was certainly his bigger. And at Brabantse when he beat Wout van Aert, that was a nice win too. And let me not forget about Alpe d'Huez when he won from the breakaway, where Chris Froome went third on that stage after being in the break, dropping down that fearless descent where Tom Pidcock bombed through everybody in the Ineos colors, caught up to the front brake, drilled it in the front brake, settled it down just a little bit, went up Alpe d'Huez, dropped everyone, won the stage. But won the stage from the breakaway. He wasn't winning from the big favorites there at the Tour de France, but a win is a win. There's no doubt about that. And Amstel Gold cannot be forgotten. Certainly, when we look at the classics with Tom Pidcock, always going in the top 5, top 10s all the time throughout his time on Team Ineos. Those are big results, but Ineos needs to win races. So that's where all the drama was happening there with Tom Pidcock riding for Team Ineos. He was the highest paid rider on Team Ineos. That's Geraint Thomas's words, not mine. I didn't say that. Geraint Thomas said that. So I'll take a guess and say 2.5 million. Maybe he's making more. Add in some other endorsements. Add in some of the mountain bike riding and the cyclocross riding. The kid could be making tons of millions of dollars, but he's the highest paid rider on Ineos. We know that for sure because, well, Geraint Thomas told us so. So at the end of 4 seasons with Team Ineos, there was some not chemistry happening exactly. Not beautiful chemistry, maybe bad chemistry you could call it, but not beautiful chemistry. So Tom Pidcock got let go after he got kicked off the team for doing Tour of Lombardy in 2024. Got kicked off that team, and then there was all kinds of drama there at Team Ineos. So Tom Pidcock grabbed his stuff, packed up his bags, and headed over to Q36.5. Now, I thought this was a good move for Q36.5 and a good move for Tom Pidcock, because now it really puts the light on Tom Pidcock at Q36.5, where he has no choice but to perform. We're back to film up going to the 2024 season one more time when we look at Tour of Suisse while he's riding for Team Ineos. This is the last race before you get ready for the 25 Tour de France. Tom Pidcock was going quite well at Tour of Suisse. He went top 10 in the general classification, and he went 5th in the individual time trial on the final stage there. And then after the final stage, what did he do? He went and rode a mountain bike race. Now, I covered this last year, but maybe you guys didn't watch that video, so I'll cover it a little bit again. When you're going over to a mountain bike race in Switzerland after finishing Tour of Suisse the weekend before the Tour de France, it's a knucklehead move. There's no doubt about it. You have to have training still after Tour of Suisse and some big training miles in your legs before you get into the Tour de France, when you have a 2-week window before the Tour of Suisse and the Tour de France starts. And when you're doing a short track mountain bike race, let's say you traveled right after Tour of Suisse where you had some really good form, you jumped in the car, you lost a couple days of training, maybe you got one good day on Wednesday, Thursday, you're pre-riding the courses. Friday and Saturday and Sunday, you got the short track races and the long race, the cross-country race, whole like hour and a half, 2-hour event. I don't know what it is. I'm not a mountain bike racer. I just know it's not enough to get you ready for the Tour de France. And that we know for sure, because once the 25 Tour de France showed up, Tom Pidcock was nowhere to be seen at that Tour de France, and then the drama starts coming in. So I see where Ineos was so grumpy there with Tom Pidcock, but I ask myself, if you're Team Ineos, why'd you sign the kid, send him over to a mountain bike race from the Tour of Suisse? And in between the Tour of Suisse and the Tour de France, whoever allowed that to happen is a knucklehead. If I had signed Tom Pidcock, which I like the kid, I don't know if I'd want him to be $2.5 million with 4 wins during those 4 seasons. I wouldn't have been happy with that. And I certainly wouldn't have signed him to say that, hey, you can go do a mountain bike race before the Tour de France, but they allowed it to happen. No wins happened for Team Ineos there from Tom Pidcock at the Tour de France. And of course, we know the drama story between Team Ineos falling out after Chris Froome and Egan Bernal's wins of Grand Tour wins. Chris Froome in 2018 at the Giro. Egan Bernal, of course, won at the Giro too, but then he had to crash in the back of the bus, and Team Ineos dropped dramatically with only some little bit of glimpses from Geraint Thomas when he was shining a little bit at the Giro d'Italia while battling against Primoz Roglic, but he lost that pink jersey to Primoz Roglic on the penultimate day when they're in the time trial, the uphill time trial where the Slovenian took the Grand Tour win there. So Team Ineos need results. This is a big budget team. Tom Pidcock's paid the most on Team Ineos, so you can understand why there'd be a bunch of drama there with only 4 big wins throughout 4 seasons. So he leaves there, he goes over to Q36.5. Now, you look at Q36.5, and you look at this team, it's incredibly small. Really, Tom Pidcock's the only name on there that's substantial that you could say this kid can come in, and if he's firing on all cylinders, you don't have Tadej Pogačar at the race, you got a shot at winning with Tom Pidcock, there's no doubt about it. But again, he's only won 4 big races before he signed over there at Q36.5. So how was it going to go? Well, with that drama, and I can tell you 100%, when you leave a team under the kind of conditions that Tom Pidcock left Team Ineos, you're fired up during the wintertime to be training and come in on all cylinders firing 100% so you can start winning and just throw it in their faces there over at Team Ineos to go, well, you let me go, now look what I'm doing. So Tom Pidcock shows up at the Lula Tour, and Q36.5 put on a remarkable show there. Tom Pidcock winning 2 stages and doing the lead out for a sprinter, Moschetti, on the final stage there, the Lula Tour, where Moschetti wins that stage. So they get 3 stages for Q36, and they win the general classification with Tom. So that starts off the season fantastic. Tom Pidcock's in a very good mood. He's excited. He's throwing some mud in the face of Team Ineos. And then he goes over to Spain. He starts racing Andalusia. Now there at Andalusia, he had fine form, continuing from the Lula Tour. But remember, you're missing first-page riders at the Lula Tour. You're missing first-page riders here at Andalusia. And so when Tom Pidcock's putting on a show there, he's racing too aggressively, and his team's falling apart too early in the race. And then Tom's being too aggressive, way too aggressive. So over there at Q36.5, it tells me that the director sportifs there aren't quite as sharp as they need to be to understand the tactical racing that Tom Pidcock was put under at Andalusia. And it tells me that Tom Pidcock doesn't have this tactical savviness to understand how to use his team a little bit better. He pulled too much. He ended up losing the general classification, but he's still super motivated. His interviews were talking big time about how I got form, I can't wait for Milan-San Remo and such races coming up as the classics, and then getting ready for the Giro d'Italia. If Q36.5 get the invite to there, then you know Tom Pidcock's 100% motivated with that form that he showed at Lula Tour and Andalusia. So he leaves there motivated, even though he didn't win the general classification, and quite possibly was on better form than Sivakov at Andalusia. But tactically, you wrote it completely wrong. Your director's allowed to happen, and you did it. So you lost there. You go over to the next races, and I'll bring you into Strade Bianche, because at Strade Bianche, tactically, nightmarish there, really. They might like the results. I'm sure Tom Pidcock liked finishing second overall at Strade Bianche, but when you're attacking Tadej Pogačar, and when you're pulling with Tadej Pogačar, that's a tactical nightmare, and you can't win that. Now, I'll remind you guys of Strade Bianche a little bit, because those 2 riders go up the road. Tom Pidcock's up the road with Tadej Pogačar, and Poggy's super excited, holding back just a little bit, because he's got some company. Why not ride a little bit? Why go solo is what Tadej Pogačar's thinking, so he backs off the throttle a little bit. He's waiting up a tad bit for Tom Pidcock, but then Poggy crashes going through that left bend, slides off the road, hops back on his bike, and Tom's thinking, I got a chance of going solo, but nobody can hold off Poggy as he bridges back up to him and then drops Tom Pidcock to win Strade Bianche solo. Tactical nightmare. I understand the results. A finish second there at Strade Bianche is a big result, but you're paid to win races. There's no doubt about that, and you do not want to go toe for toe with Tadej Pogačar. I've had that explanation many times on Beyond the Coverage in the Butterfly Effect, so you guys should be familiar with why you don't go toe to toe with Tadej Pogačar, but Tom Pidcock believes he did. I believe Poggy just backed off the throttle and waited for Tom so he'd have a little bit more help to get deeper into the race and then solo like he did. So you can decide yourself, but I think it's a nightmare tactic. After that, Tom Pidcock goes into the classics, and we start talking about Milan-San Remo, where it was a high favorite there, and he was motivated to do something special at the beginning of the 5 monuments of the 25 season. And Tom Pidcock has some bad luck. You can't predict this. He goes into the Sorpresa just as it's beginning, gets caught up in a crash. There was a little bit of a hole in the road on the left side, and he's caught up behind those guys, goes down. Milan-San Remo's over. Now, that crash might have had some repercussions, because later when he went into the classics, when we're talking about the Ardennes Classic, excuse me, as he gets up there where he has Amstel, Flèche, and Liège-Bastogne-Liège, well, we see him go third at Flèche-Wallonne and top 10 at Liège-Bastogne-Liège, so it wasn't the happiest of times, but he is still grabbing a ton of points for Q36.5 that need a ton of points because they don't have a whole lot of depth on their team, with the exception of Tom Pidcock being signed. So he's picking up points, but he's not winning races necessarily, or certainly not big ones. But he does and has shown that he has better form throughout the 25 season than he did in the 24 season, and certainly for a longer period. I think when we take the 4 years at Team Ineos, at times he's had the same peak kind of form. But the problem that Tom Pidcock's always had is, how do you hold that peak form for longer periods so you can get results over a month period or 2 or 3 month period? And certainly you want him in July, and certainly you want him at the classics in April. But he's always seems to have missed just a little bit of being able to hold his form longer, and I give that down to the details of too much mountain bike riding in between the races, and of course dropping a little bit of form there. But I would need to see his training diary and talk to a rider in person before I could tell you for sure. But that was always the MO, versus this year. His form held a little bit more steady from Andalusia all the way up until we finished the classics there in Belgium up north. Now he goes over to the Giro d'Italia, and again, he's the big hot-handed favorite there for Q36.5. So he's got the whole 7 riders on his 8-rider team backing him up behind, trying to protect him. And he wisely raced tactically smart the first few stages. They weren't ideal for the British rider, so he backs off the throttle and stays with the general classification favorites and goes into stage 9, the Strade Bianche stage. Well, that stage he crashed, and when you throw in a crash, it's pretty hard to say a rider raced bad after a crash when we're talking about that stage 9, so it's hard to predict where he could have gone at the Giro, but we know he went a little bit flat at the Giro. Okay, we're bringing fast forward. We start getting through the Tour de France, where we saw Tadej Pogačar win. Q36.5 weren't invited because they're a small team, but we go into the finish of the year at the Vuelta a España, and we know just before the Vuelta at Tour of Norway, there Tom Pidcock wins 1 stage, finishes 2nd overall general classification, starts the Vuelta a España with a little bit of form. We also know, and especially if you followed the butterfly effect and beyond the coverage, I told you Jonas Vingegaard throughout the 25 season has not been 100% sharp like we have seen the 3 seasons before, when we're talking about 22, 23, and 24 seasons. Now in 25, Jonas Vingegaard has been a little bit down on form, but still one of the absolute favorites to win the Vuelta a España, along with Almeida. We start that race there looking at Tom Pidcock. He raced there pretty wisely. Smart enough to know on stage 9 when Jonas Vingegaard goes solo to try to win that stage. Smart enough to know not to pull with Almeida if you're going to get dropped. I like this tactic. Almeida looked over at him, asked him to grow some balls and stuff on that stage 9, but wisely so. There's no reason to have big balls if you're going to get dropped. So Tom Pidcock's tactics there on stage 9 of staying behind Almeida until they get over the steeper part of the climb, where he can start doing a little bit more work with Almeida, was wise. And of course, he goes on to get in a podium finish on that stage. But most importantly, when we fast forward in stage 11, Tom Pidcock does what? Drops Jonas Vingegaard. Now, this was an amazing move here, because we had not seen a ride quite like this from Pidcock, being able to drop a rider like Jonas Vingegaard. He drops him, and I know, and you guys probably know, it was only for a few seconds, but it was a solid few seconds. Jonas had to struggle to come back to his wheel. And we all got to believe, sitting here on the Chesterfield, that if you took 10 sprints against Jonas Vingegaard and Tom Pidcock, you'd pick Tom Pidcock for probably 9 of those. So we believe he missed the chance at winning that stage because of the protest on stage 11 there, the Vuelta a España. But when the Vuelta finishes, the 3 weeks of racing, Tom Pidcock finishes 3rd on the general classification. So overall, at the Vuelta a España, it was a remarkable ride, and a 25 season that I think is more indicative of what a rider of his pay scale should be getting, because when you look at the UCI standings, well, Tom is sitting 7th overall. I mean, he's one spot ahead of Matthew Vanderpool, right? Matthew Vanderpool, first-page rider. Tom Pidcock is not a first-page rider, but still is ahead on UCI points when it's all said and done because of his consistency throughout the whole season. So he has done a remarkable job of upping his consistency from the 4 previous years at Team Ineos and adding in a little bit more flair and bringing in some more wins. But again, still missing some big wins when it's all said and done, even though probably would have had that stage 11 of the Vuelta a España. Either way, bringing the team up with 7th place on the general classification of the UCI calendar when it's all said and done, it's going to add some points over there to the team. So now we go into what this video was supposed to be, Q36.5, and their signing for the 26th season. They have altered their team dramatically, and mainly because they've added the right amount of help there for Tom to be able to ride deep into the mountain stages and always have teammates looking after him. I love the signing of Chris Hoppe. Hopper's a magical rider. We have seen him side by side with Yates, and we know for sure he can go deep into the mountain stages, and we saw him win stage 20 Col de Fenesta, the Giro d'Italia in 2025. That's Chris Hoppe winning solo up there to take that marvelous stage victory. So they have signed a fine rider that knows how to do super domestique work and can do it properly. That's the most important signing that I see for next year, the 26th season for Q36.5, but that's not the only good signing. They have other riders that signed, and I'll tell you the most second important rider that I like, Quinten Hermans. Alpecin de Koenig's Matthew Vanderpool team have allowed Quinten Hermans to leave the team and sign for Q36.5. I like this rider. I always have, especially when he won a stage of the Basque Country, and he's gone top 3 at Liège, Bastogne-Liège. Quinten Hermans is a rider that can ride most of the season on top form, and he can get over the early climbs, but most importantly, he can always look after a rider until the final or the penultimate climb of any chaotic stage, Grand Tour racing stages that is, or week-long stage races. Quinten Hermans is the rider you want on your team because he knows how to race his bike and he's on form often. Now the next rider that I'll talk about here is Eddie Dunbar. Eddie Dunbar, like Chris Hoppe, comes over from Jayco Lula, who's just having team riders decimated, dropping out of Jayco Lula, going to other places, as Jayco Lula's got some other problems on their own, but we'll have to leave that for another video. When we look at Eddie Dunbar, this is a rider that has gone top 10 at the Giro d'Italia. This is a rider that won 2 stages of the Tour of Spain, but it's also a rider that has a problem of predicting exactly when he can be on form. He's had some injuries that have caused some of that, but maybe there's some other details in there. If you knew him personally better than I do, you might be able to pinpoint some other problems that he's having of not being able to arrive often enough on his best form. But when he is on good form, Eddie Dunbar is a fabulous rider and can go deep into the mountain stages. There's absolutely zero doubt about that. All right, we look a little bit further down and we see this rider, Thomas Glaug. Okay, he's come over from Visma Bike. Now, Thomas Glaug's had some solid results at his younger years, but a little bit quieter going into the 25 season. And so he leaves Visma Bike, comes over here to Q36.5, but he should be, what I believe anyways, should be a climber that can get over most of the climbs if he can get himself 100% on form and be there until the final climb, which means Tom Pidcock has riders like Quinten Hermans, he'll have riders Chris Hoppe, you have Eddie Dunbar there, and possibly Thomas Glaug. That's a huge change than what we have seen from Q36 in years past, certainly in the 25 season, years past. Let's just go 1 year. So in the 25 season where Tom Pidcock doesn't have so much depth going deep into the mountain stages, now he's got riders, 4 riders that can possibly get in there deeper and send him up with the best riders in the world or ride the front if he is to put himself into pink, into yellow, or into red at one of the Grand Tour races. He has riders that can protect a little bit deeper. Now, the biggest problem with Tom Pidcock, of course, is his time trialing ability is not fantastic, so he'll need to work on that. But if he can get that a little bit more tuned, or if there's some tactical games, it's quite possible we could see Tom Pidcock wearing a Race Leaders Grand Tour jersey in the near future. And having these riders signed by him is going to be massive important with those 4 climbers. Now, that's not it, though. They've signed 10 new riders over there at Q36.5, and they got some important Flatlander riders that we certainly got to take a look at, because Zandra Mayus is one of them, and the other rider is going to be Brent Van Moor. Zandra Mayus is coming from Alpecin de Koenig again, along with the rider that I talked about, Quinten Hermans. They both abandoned Alpecin and going over to Q36.5. But Sander Mayus is certainly a rider that's going to be able to do a bulk of the work and look after the team throughout the whole early parts of the flatter stages, but be a marvelous rider and a good lead-out rider to look after their sprinters over there, because they did sign Sam Bennett, which won't help Tom any, but it might help Muschietti when you put Muschietti and Sam Bennett together. So having Sander Mayus might be a good signing there to help them find wins someplace else and help Tom Pidcock in the early stages of any of the week-long or 3-week Grand Tour races. Crucial signing there, Sander Mayus. Love that. Brent Van Moor, same type of rider. I love the signing of Brent Van Moor. So when we look overall at Q36.5, they have done a fantastic job of basically signing 10 riders for the 26 year, but putting together a whole new team that can back up Tom Pidcock going into the races if he can up his level just a hair bit more, keep his tactics a little bit and more intelligently, so not being a knucklehead, because I could take you in the Giro Emilia this year, 2025, where he's going up Giro Emilia climb, and he's doing what? He's pulling Del Toro to the finish. He rode the whole climb attacking up the front. Del Toro bridged to the back wheel there of Tom, and Tom stayed on the front and let out Del Toro Giro Emilia. It was a nightmare tactic. So right now, there's many things that Tom Pidcock needs, but a team is not necessarily one of them, because he's got a solid team signed with these 10 riders, at least 7, 8 of them out of these 10 guys signing. He has that. Now he needs to smarten up the tactics quite a bit better, really, and get the director sportifs on the same page. And then after that, he needs to just keep his level as high as it possibly can for a longer period of time, much like he's done here at the 25 season. 1% more form, steady throughout the season, and all of a sudden we might see Q36.5, one of those teams top 10 in the UCI rankings instead of 19th like we see him right now at this moment. Hope you guys like my take up here at Q36.5 and Tom Pidcock. Make sure you hit the like and subscribe button, and I'll see you guys for the next video real soon.